You've probably been told your whole life to be nice, to give people closure, to explain yourself so you don't seem cold or selfish. But what if I told you that constantly justifying your actions is what's keeping you stuck? What if the most powerful thing you could do right now is walk away? No apology, no explanation, just walk. Today we're going to talk about how mastering the art of walking away is not weakness. It's the ultimate display of strength, self-worth, and emotional maturity. Boundaries are not walls to shut people out. They are doors you choose to close when you know the room behind them no longer brings you peace. They're a declaration of self-respect. And here's the truth. If you don't respect yourself enough to set boundaries, the world will never learn how to respect you either. Walking away without explaining yourself is one of the strongest forms of setting that boundary. It's not loud, it's not dramatic, but it's powerful because it says, I value my peace more than your opinion of me. Too often we give people explanations, not because they deserve them, but because we're still trying to be liked. We want to seem nice. We want to be understood. But real strength is walking away knowing that your reason is enough, even if no one else gets it. That kind of self-respect doesn't scream. It doesn't argue. It doesn't seek approval. It simply moves forward. Most of us were never taught how to set boundaries. We were taught to be polite, to be accommodating, to keep the peace at the cost of our own. But when you start prioritizing your own well-being, when you start valuing how you feel more than how others feel about you, that's when everything begins to shift. You start realizing that every time you say yes when you mean no, a little part of you gets lost. Every time you explain yourself to someone who isn't listening, you abandon yourself a little more. Respecting yourself enough to walk away doesn't require anyone else's permission. It requires clarity. It requires courage. It requires finally recognizing that your time, your energy, and your emotions are not up for negotiation anymore. There is nothing noble about staying in situations that shrink you just because you're afraid of how it will look if you leave. There's nothing strong about sacrificing your sanity for people who wouldn't lose a wink of sleep over yours. Boundaries mean knowing where you end and someone else begins. They mean recognizing that your mental health is not a group project. And once you understand this, once you really absorb that self-respect means making the decision to honor your needs without needing to explain them, you start walking differently. You start living differently. You stop seeking closure from people who were never open to seeing your side in the first place. When you walk away from a situation that drains you, whether it's a relationship, a job, a friendship, you're not giving up. You're growing up. You're choosing to stop justifying your presence in spaces that don't value it. You're deciding that you don't owe the world a press release every time you choose yourself. People might not like it. That's okay. They might call you distant, cold, or selfish. Let them. That discomfort they feel when you walk away without an explanation, that's not your burden to carry. That's their resistance to losing the version of you that always stayed too long, explained too much, and gave too freely. That version is gone, and in its place stands someone who finally gets it. Someone who realizes that boundaries are not barriers. They are standards. They are the invisible lines that say, this is where I stop being responsible for your feelings and start being responsible for my own. Every time you walk away with your head held high and your soul intact, you teach people how to treat you. You reinforce the message that your presence is earned, not entitled. You remind yourself that your life isn't a courtroom where every decision needs to be defended. You're allowed to say, this doesn't feel right, and leave. You're allowed to say, I don't have the energy for this, and step back. You're allowed to put yourself first, not as a last resort, but as a first response. That's what self-respect looks like. It looks like silence when someone demands an explanation you no longer feel obligated to give. It looks like distance when your boundaries are pushed. It looks like peace, earned, claimed, protected, at all costs. And the best part? When you get comfortable with walking away without explaining yourself, you gain time, you gain clarity, you gain freedom from the emotional gymnastics of over-explaining, over-apologizing, overthinking. You stop being available for conversations that drain you, for debates that go nowhere, for people who want your energy but not your growth. You stop pouring from a cup that no one ever bothers to refill. Walking away isn't the end of something. It's the beginning of you stepping fully into your power, into your peace, and into a life that's no longer dictated by other people's expectations. And that starts with one choice: to respect yourself enough to stop justifying your boundaries and start living them. No need to explain, just walk. The truth is, you don't owe anyone an explanation for prioritizing your peace. That's a hard pill to swallow, especially if you've been conditioned to constantly explain yourself, defend your choices, and seek approval from others. But here's the reality. Your peace is personal. It belongs to you, and no one else is entitled to a piece of it just because they don't understand your silence. When you walk away from a situation, a relationship, or a version of yourself that no longer serves you, there's a natural urge to explain. You want to say, "I'm not a bad person," or "I didn't mean to hurt you," or "This is why I had to do it." That urge doesn't make you weak. It makes you human. We all want to be understood. We all want to be seen in a good light. We all want closure for them and for ourselves. But growth, real growth, requires that you become okay with being misunderstood. That's the hard part. It's not the walking away. It's dealing with the discomfort of not being able to tie everything up in a neat little bow. But the truth is, life isn't a movie. You don't always get the final monologue. You don't always get the exit scene. Sometimes all you get is a quiet moment, a deep breath, and a decision to move forward. And that has to be enough. When you feel the need to explain your piece, ask yourself, who am I really trying to convince? Because more often than not, the explanation isn't for the other person, it's for your own guilt. You want to make sure you don't come off as cold, ungrateful, or selfish. But here's what you need to realize. People who truly care about you won't need paragraphs to respect your decisions. And the ones who demand constant explanations often aren't listening. They're just waiting to argue. Your peace should not be up for debate. You don't need to defend why you're protecting your mental health. You don't need to justify why you've outgrown certain environments. You don't need to explain why you're stepping into a higher version of yourself. That path is yours, and not everyone will walk it with you. Some will be confused. Some will be offended. Some will twist your silence into arrogance, but none of that is your responsibility. Every time you explain yourself, you re-enter a negotiation you already ended. You open the door for someone to challenge your clarity, and when your peace is fragile, it doesn't need to be debated, it needs to be protected. If someone doesn't respect your need for distance without needing a full explanation, they were never really on your side to begin with. Real relationships respect boundaries. Real friends don't guilt trip you into staying in situations that break you. Real love allows space for transformation, even if it means growing apart. Let's talk about the fear behind all of this. The fear of looking like the bad guy. The fear of losing people. The fear of being seen as cold or heartless. That fear is natural, but it's also misleading. Because what's really happening is that you're shedding a version of yourself that was too wrapped up in people-pleasing. You're letting go of the need to be liked by everyone, and that's not cold. That's powerful. That's freedom. The more you grow, the more you'll find that silence is your best answer. Not every action needs a defense. Not every departure needs a speech. Sometimes your energy is better spent on healing, reflecting, and becoming, not convincing someone why your peace matters. Walk away knowing that you're not abandoning anyone. You're simply choosing not to abandon yourself anymore. This shift won't feel natural at first. You'll second guess it. You'll feel tempted to send the long text. You'll rehearse conversations in your head that will never happen. That's okay. But let those thoughts pass like clouds. Breathe through them. And remember this: you are not responsible for managing someone else's perception of your peace. People who get upset when you don't explain yourself were never interested in understanding you. They were interested in controlling you. Your silence breaks that cycle. It sends a message that says, I trust myself enough to walk away, even if no one claps for me. In the end, peace doesn't come from explaining. It comes from releasing, letting go, trusting your intuition, and being okay with the fact that some people will never understand your journey. That's not your job. Your job is to honor yourself enough to choose peace and walk toward it without guilt, without drama, and without the need for anyone's permission. The more you explain your choices, the more vulnerable you become to having those choices questioned, picked apart, and invalidated. That's the reality. Every time you open the door to justification, you open the door for someone else to judge your decision. And that's where the energy drain begins. Because instead of standing firm in your truth, you start second guessing it. You begin to wonder if maybe you shouldn't have walked away, if maybe you were too sensitive, too emotional, too quick. You begin to internalize their confusion as your fault, and now you're caught in a loop, explaining, defending, and slowly shrinking your power. When you explain your boundaries, your absence, your silence, especially to people who've already shown they don't value them, you give them leverage. You give them a map to your emotional triggers. You hand over a blueprint of how to manipulate you next time. They know where you're soft, where you feel guilty, where you doubt yourself. And guess what? Some people will use that against you. Not everyone deserves an inside look at why you're doing what you're doing. Not everyone needs a detailed breakdown of your growth. If someone has consistently ignored your needs, neglected your feelings, or crossed the line more than once, they don't need an explanation, they need a consequence. And that consequence can be silence, a clean break, a calm walk away. Because silence is power. Walking away without a word is clarity. It's not about punishing the other person, it's about protecting you. It's about not being baited into an emotional tug of war. It's about conserving your strength and moving forward instead of being pulled back into a cycle of convincing someone to understand something they're not even open to hearing. A person who respects you will not need a 10-point presentation to accept your boundaries. They may be surprised. They may even be hurt, but they will honor your decision. They will take accountability. They won't force you to relive your pain just to make them feel better about your exit. That's the difference between someone who is emotionally mature and someone who is emotionally manipulative. The mature person respects space. The manipulative one demands explanation. When you feel the urge to explain yourself, pause. Ask yourself, what am I trying to gain from this explanation? Validation, closure, understanding? And then ask, has this person shown me in the past that they are capable of giving me those things? Because if the answer is no, if they've repeatedly dismissed your feelings, ignored your voice, or weaponized your vulnerability, then your explanation isn't going to change anything. It's just going to exhaust you. Again, there is incredible power in saying nothing, in choosing peace over proving a point, in choosing movement over emotional negotiation. It doesn't mean you're heartless. It doesn't mean you're avoiding accountability. It means you're prioritizing your mental and emotional well-being. You're choosing not to waste your voice on people who aren't listening. You see, silence is not emptiness. Silence is presence. It says, I know what I'm doing. I trust myself. I'm not waiting for you to catch up. I'm already gone. It's a powerful message to yourself that you don't need outside permission to make the right choice for your life. You don't need everyone to clap for you. You don't need everyone to understand. You just need to move with confidence, with clarity, and with zero regret. There will be people who spin stories about your silence. Let them. There will be people who call you cold, call you dramatic, say you changed. Let them. You are not responsible for their narrative. You are only responsible for your peace. Let people misunderstand you. Let them judge you. Let them wonder. Because at the end of the day, your healing doesn't need their validation. Your next chapter doesn't need their cosign. And when you get used to not explaining yourself, when you get used to walking away with your head held high and your dignity intact, you realize how much power you were giving away before. You realize how often you let people delay your progress just because you wanted to be fair or polite. But there's nothing polite about sacrificing your peace to make someone else comfortable. You deserve to move forward without guilt. You deserve to end chapters that no longer serve you without an audience. You deserve to walk away clean, silent, and strong without the burden of having to justify your strength. So stop talking, start walking. Let your actions speak, and let your peace be the only explanation you ever need. It's uncomfortable, really uncomfortable. Walking away without explaining yourself triggers every part of your conditioning that's been wired to keep others happy. You feel guilty, you second guess, you wonder if you should go back and say something, just to ease the tension. But here's the truth. Choosing that discomfort is exactly how you reclaim your self-worth. You've spent years being taught that pleasing others is the path to peace, that if you're kind enough, polite enough, agreeable enough, you'll be safe. You won't lose anyone. You won't cause waves. So you over-explain, you justify, you soften your decisions until they're no longer yours, and all of it, every single excuse you make, is you subconsciously saying, please like me. But real self-worth, it's built on the exact opposite. Self-worth means you are willing to let people misunderstand you if it means protecting your growth. It means you're willing to feel uncomfortable for a while because you know you're making the right choice for the long run. You choose the pain of growth over the comfort of approval. And that is powerful. There will be moments where you want to run back and explain yourself, to clarify, to patch it up. Not because you're wrong, but because you're still healing from the part of you that believes being liked is more important than being whole. You want them to know you're not cruel, that you're not abandoning them, that you still care. But again, that's not self-worth. That's seeking validation. And the more you chase that, the further you drift from yourself. You don't need to be cruel to be clear. You don't need to slam doors or burn bridges, but you do need to be honest enough to say, I'm done, and not follow it with a paragraph explaining your emotional resume. You do not exist to be understood by everyone. You exist to live in alignment with who you are becoming. Walking away without explanation will challenge every part of your identity that's still built on people-pleasing. It'll make you question yourself. It'll make you wonder if you're doing the right thing. But every time you push through that moment, you get stronger. You start to build a life that isn't built on approval, but on truth. You start to notice the relationships that drained you only existed because you kept making excuses for staying. You start to see how much of your energy was spent just trying to be understood by people who never truly listen. That discomfort you feel, that knot in your stomach when you don't explain, is growth. It's a sign that you're moving in a new direction, a direction where your value isn't attached to how well you manage someone else's feelings. You don't need everyone to get it. You just need to get yourself. And you do that by choosing yourself, even when it's hard. This kind of emotional growth doesn't happen overnight. It happens every time you choose discomfort over people-pleasing. Every time you walk away from a conversation you don't owe. Every time you feel the urge to explain and you don't. Every time you remind yourself that your value isn't in the clarity you give to others, it's in the clarity you have within. So the next time you feel the pull to explain your absence, pause. Breathe. Remind yourself who you're doing this for. You're not doing it to hurt them. You're doing it to stop hurting yourself. That's the shift. That's the new foundation. That's where your worth is being rebuilt. Not on how well you manage someone else's comfort, but on how fiercely you protect your own. Self-worth isn't loud. It doesn't need to convince or convert. It's quiet. It's still. It walks away with grace, not because it doesn't care, but because it cares deeply about peace, about growth, about finally becoming the version of yourself who no longer needs to explain why you chose you. Sometimes the most powerful chapters in your life are the ones that end without a conclusion, without a final conversation, without closure. You grow, you shift, you wake up one day and realize that continuing to explain yourself to people who never truly listened, never truly cared, is exhausting. So you leave quietly, without the need to wrap it up in a nice little bow or tie down every loose end. That's not weakness, that's strength. And that's something not everyone will understand. We are conditioned to believe that every relationship, every job, every friendship, and every situation deserves a full circle ending. We're told we owe people an explanation, a reason, a final word. But that belief comes from a place of emotional dependence. The truth is, not every chapter needs to be closed with a conversation. Sometimes you just outgrow things. Sometimes you walk away, and that's all the closure you'll ever need. There's a kind of peace that comes when you stop needing to explain why you left. When you realize that the only person who needs to understand your decision is you. The desire to explain often stems from the hope that the other person will validate your pain, that they'll acknowledge the damage, the disrespect, the patterns that made you walk. But most of the time, they won't. Most of the time, the very reason you're leaving is because they're incapable of seeing you clearly in the first place. So why go back and reopen your wounds just to get a reaction you already know won't come? You don't need another debate. You don't need to rehash every broken promise. What you need is space, distance, separation, silence. Because in that silence, something sacred happens. You begin to heal. Walking away without closure teaches you to rely on your own voice instead of the validation of others. You stop waiting for someone to get it. You stop waiting for them to finally realize your worth. You stop needing someone else to make peace with your decision so you can move forward. You start making peace with it yourself. And when you reach that point, you become unshakable. We live in a world obsessed with communication, with over-explaining, with endless discussions and text threads and messages, trying to make people understand our pain. But not everyone is ready to hear your truth. Not everyone is capable of digesting the weight of your emotions. And some people will twist your words, guilt trip you, and manipulate you into second guessing what you already know in your gut. So stop handing over your power. There's a profound lesson in realizing that the ending doesn't need to be dramatic or destructive. It just needs to be decisive. You don't need to yell. You don't need to cry. You don't even need to say goodbye. Your actions speak louder than your explanations ever could. Silence can be a complete sentence. And sometimes it's the loudest, most powerful thing you'll ever say. The beautiful thing about choosing to walk away without explaining is that you reclaim the time and energy you would have spent trying to convince someone of your truth. That energy can now go into rebuilding yourself, into rediscovering who you are without the noise of confusion or the weight of trying to be understood. You get to redefine what peace feels like without needing anyone else to approve of it. You're not weak for wanting to leave without drama. You're not heartless for choosing your sanity over someone else's comfort. And you're not wrong for deciding that the closure you were waiting for wasn't coming, and that you weren't going to let that keep you stuck any longer. Some endings aren't conversations, they're realizations. Realizing that you've said everything there is to say. realizing that continuing to talk will only delay your healing, realizing that your growth is outpacing the space you're in. And when that realization hits, it's not just okay to walk away, it's necessary. Let go of the need for everything to be understood. Let go of the idea that you have to explain why you're leaving in order for it to be valid. You know your story, you've lived it, and you're allowed to protect your peace without defending it. Walking away without closure isn't you being cruel. It's you finally giving yourself permission to move forward without dragging the weight of old conversations behind you. You're allowed to start a new chapter without writing an ending for the last one. You're allowed to simply turn the page. And that is freedom. The people who truly deserve to be in your life are the ones who don't demand explanations every time you make a decision to protect your peace. They don't question your silence, your boundaries, or your need for space. They don't require a full report on why you didn't respond to a message, why you said no, or why you walked away. Because they understand something deeper, that real connection comes with respect, not control. That when someone says, "This isn't working for me," or "I need distance," it's not an attack. It's an act of self-awareness. The ones who deserve you will never make you feel bad for choosing yourself. There's a subtle but powerful difference between people who care and people who want control. The ones who care check in without guilt tripping. They ask if you're okay without making your answer about them. They let you walk without chaining you to their expectations. They don't take your silence personally. But the ones who seek control, they'll call you selfish for growing. They'll call you disloyal for leaving situations that were never healthy for you in the first place. They'll weaponize your absence to shame you into staying. And that's how you know they were never really for you. They were just for the version of you that tolerated things to keep them comfortable. One of the most liberating realizations you can ever have is this: you don't have to exhaust yourself explaining your boundaries to people who don't honor them. You don't have to convince someone why you're choosing peace, healing, or distance. You're allowed to choose those things simply because you need them. No further explanation required. The right people get it. The right people support your growth, even if it doesn't benefit them. The right people understand that love isn't ownership, and respect doesn't demand proof. And this goes beyond just personal relationships. It applies to your job, your family, your environment, even your old habits. You don't need to justify walking away from a career that drains you just because others think it's secure. You don't need to explain to your family why you're creating distance from toxic dynamics that have been swept under the rug for decades. You don't have to rationalize the need for a new start, a slower pace, or a total change of direction in your life. People who are truly for you will cheer you on, not challenge you at every turn. Many people stay stuck in painful, soul-sucking places just to avoid being misunderstood. They keep giving explanations, hoping one day others will get it. But not everyone will, not everyone wants to. And chasing that understanding becomes a prison. It holds you back from growth because you're constantly trying to please people who benefit from your confusion and silence. The people who deserve you won't keep you in that prison. They'll give you the key and tell you to run toward the life you were meant to live. It's not your job to educate everyone on your journey. It's not your role to be the explainer, the validator, the peacemaker every time you evolve. If someone needs a 1,000-word essay to believe you're doing what's best for you, they were never listening in the first place. And if they were listening, they wouldn't ask. They'd feel your shift, respect your move, and let you go without drama. The truth is, people who make you feel guilty for having boundaries are people who benefited from you not having any. They were never interested in your well-being, only in your availability. And when that availability ends, so does their loyalty. That's not real connection, that's conditional tolerance. You deserve better. You deserve connections that breathe, not choke. Relationships that expand, not shrink you. circles that evolve with you, not ones that trap you in your old identity. And the people who truly, deeply deserve a place in your story are the ones who don't fight your freedom, they fuel it. They don't beg you to stay in rooms that are slowly killing your spirit. They hold the door open and say, go, be who you were meant to be. And if the path brings us back together, good. And if not, I'm still proud of you. So stop over-explaining. Stop shrinking your voice to fit into places you've already outgrown. Stop apologizing for choosing a life that feels right to you. You're not here to be understood by everyone. You're here to become the version of yourself that doesn't need their permission. The ones who deserve you won't need convincing. They'll understand you through your actions. They'll trust your silence, and they'll honor the decision you made, even if it wasn't about them. Because that's what love without control looks like. That's what respect without condition sounds like. And that's how you know you're finally surrounded by people who deserve your energy, your presence, and your peace. Explaining yourself over and over again is like running on a treadmill that's going nowhere. Every word you offer in justification is energy you're handing away. Energy that could be used to build yourself, heal yourself, or move forward. Yet most people feel the need to explain their choices because we've been conditioned to believe we owe everyone a reason. We don't. Every time you try to justify walking away from something or someone toxic, you are offering emotional real estate to a situation that no longer deserves access to your life. This is the trap. You keep trying to make people see your side, hoping that if they finally understand your pain or your boundary, they'll agree with it, they'll approve it, and somehow it will hurt less. But the truth is, their approval won't heal you. It won't make it easier. It won't change anything. You are allowed to leave. You are allowed to protect your peace. And you are allowed to do so quietly, without fanfare, without writing a dissertation. Walking away is hard enough, especially when you care. But when you add the pressure of needing to explain your exit in a way that doesn't upset anyone, you burden yourself twice. You end up carrying the weight of your pain and their expectations. People who truly care about you will never demand endless explanations. They may ask, they may be curious, but they won't guilt you. And if they do, then their concern was never about your well-being. It was about their control over your decisions. This is where your power lies, in knowing the difference between sharing and defending. Sharing is a gift you give when you want to. Defending is a pressure you absorb when you feel you have to. When you begin to understand that difference, you'll stop giving away your power in conversations that don't deserve your time. Let's talk about energy. You only have so much to give every day, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. Every word you use to justify yourself drains that tank. Think about how often you've walked away from a conversation where you tried to explain your boundary and ended up more confused, more exhausted, and more emotionally entangled than you were before. That's not progress. That's emotional leakage, and it's time to seal that leak. Protecting your energy isn't selfish, it's strategic. You're not abandoning people, you're refusing to abandon yourself. You're not cutting off communication, you're choosing not to engage in conversations that require you to shrink, twist, or soften the truth of your lived experience. Not everything needs to be explained. Sometimes walking away in silence is the most powerful thing you can do. Silence doesn't mean you don't care. It means you've already said everything you needed to, maybe not to them, but to yourself. And that's enough. We live in a world that demands we be accessible, explainable, and agreeable at all times. But real growth happens when you learn how to walk away without looking back, without sending a follow-up message, without needing someone to say, "You're right." You don't need to be right in their eyes. You need to be free in your own. Walking away without explaining yourself is an emotional skill that takes practice. At first, you'll want to go back and just clarify. You'll want to soften the blow. You'll want to explain your silence. But with time, you'll realize that your silence isn't cold, it's clarity. You are choosing to use your energy where it matters, not to fight battles that have already been lost, not to keep broken things stitched together with your own exhaustion. Energy is everything. Where you put it determines how you feel, who you become, and what kind of life you create. If you keep pouring it into people who require an explanation for your healing, you'll never have enough left to actually heal. The art is in knowing when to speak and when to preserve your strength, when to explain and when to walk, when to fight for something and when to let it fall. Not every battle deserves your fire. Some situations are best left behind, not because you're weak, but because you finally recognize your worth. And that's what walking away is really about. Worth. It's not about revenge. It's not about making someone miss you. It's about understanding that your energy is sacred. Your peace is sacred. And anyone who requires you to abandon yourself in order to keep them happy doesn't deserve another word from you. So the next time you feel the urge to explain your exit, pause. Ask yourself, am I doing this because I truly want to communicate or because I'm afraid of being misunderstood? If it's fear, breathe. You can survive being misunderstood. What you can't survive is constantly draining your soul just to keep people comfortable. Walk away, protect your peace, and let your silence be the loudest answer you've ever given. Walking away without explaining yourself is more than a reaction. It's a deeply developed emotional skill. It takes strength to bite your tongue, hold your ground, and walk in a direction that feels right to your soul without needing someone else to co-sign your decision. Emotional mastery isn't loud. It doesn't yell, defend, or argue. It doesn't beg to be understood. It simply chooses peace, and it chooses it boldly. That's what walking away really is, the boldest kind of peace. We are conditioned to seek validation. From childhood, we're trained to explain every action, every choice, every move. Why did you do that? What were you thinking? Don't leave people hanging. That mindset gets wired in. So when we become adults, we feel like we owe the world an explanation for every decision we make, especially the ones that disappoint or confuse others. But at some point, you learn that you're not here to carry the weight of everyone's comfort. You're here to carry your own truth. And sometimes your truth says, I don't need to explain this. I just need to go. Emotional maturity is understanding that you can't always make people comfortable with your boundaries. Some people will be hurt. Some will be angry. Some will call you selfish. That's the price. But here's what's more expensive: staying stuck in spaces that drain you just because you're too afraid of being misunderstood. That fear of being the bad guy keeps so many people tied to jobs they hate, relationships that hurt, friendships that are one-sided, and routines that no longer serve them. But maturity is realizing that being misunderstood is a small price to pay for your peace. You'll reach a point in your journey where you stop needing to be the hero in other people's stories. You don't need to fix it. You don't need to make it make sense to them. You don't need to say, this is why I'm leaving, or here's everything that hurt me. You already lived that pain. You already endured the disappointment. You already tried to explain it once, twice, maybe 100 times, and nothing changed. So now you get to choose a new approach, a quiet exit, a silent shift, a powerful withdrawal that isn't about revenge. It's about freedom. There is power in silence. It is not passive. It is not weakness. It is composed strength. When you don't explain, you leave no cracks for guilt or manipulation to crawl through. You protect yourself because people will twist your words. They'll debate your reasons. They'll try to guilt you into staying. But when you say nothing, they are left with only their own reflection. And sometimes that's exactly what they need to see. Your silence becomes the mirror, and that mirror more than any explanation, tells the whole truth. People who truly value and respect you won't need 1,000-word explanation. They'll feel the shift, they'll understand the boundary, they'll respect the space. Those who don't, they never listened when you spoke anyway. So why explain now? Walking away quietly is about reclaiming your energy. You stop giving people access to your time, your emotions, your vulnerability when they've already shown they don't value it. You stop bleeding yourself dry trying to be understood by people who aren't capable of hearing you. And when you do that, when you finally choose you, you take your power back, not in a loud, angry way, but in a still, steady way that says, I trust myself now. I don't need your permission. This kind of growth is uncomfortable. Your brain will scream to explain. Your nervous system will itch for closure. You'll want to clarify, to fix it, to be seen as kind or reasonable. But don't give in. Not this time. Let it feel uncomfortable. Sit in the tension, because every time you resist the urge to explain yourself to someone who doesn't deserve that access, you grow stronger. You train your nervous system to handle peace, even when peace feels foreign. Eventually, walking away becomes natural. You don't flinch. You don't second guess. You don't go back to justify it. You just walk. And that walk, that quiet departure, it becomes your loudest declaration. I choose myself. I honor my growth. I don't owe anyone my peace. This is the art of walking away without explaining yourself. It's not cruelty, it's clarity. It's not abandonment, it's alignment. It's not about winning, it's about not losing yourself.